Okay, there we go. We are officially recording. Letting folks in. Okay. All right. Hello, my name is Robin Morning. I am a Black biracial queer femme. I'm wearing a cream color hoodie that's really plushy and soft. In the background, you can kind of see a bookcase, a messy computer area to my right, and the back of a couch. I'm downstairs in our family room in the basement because, you know, Zoom, pandemic, work life. I am one of the team members that's scaling up, and I'm really excited to be here today with everybody to talk about affinity groups. What are they? Why are we doing it? What are the benefits and all of that? So with me today, I have, and as I call your name, dear Roundtable friends, can you please wave your hands if you would like, you don't have to. I have Mercedes Zamudio. I have Dr. Nacho Herrero. I have Jackie Johnson. And we're waiting for our friend Ernesto Segismundo, who should be arriving soon. I think there were some technical issues. All right, so let's get started with a couple of logistical elements. You do not have to remain on camera. If you are a participant, you can turn your camera off. I also encourage you to please mute yourself so that any loud vehicles driving by or barking dogs or whatever aren't causing a disruption for folks. And feel free to utilize the chat to put any questions or comments in. We will take questions during specific points so that we make sure that we're getting everything and not missing them as we go. So we will let you know when we are taking questions. If there's a question that we are unable to get to during our time together today, and you really want your question answered, please send us an email. I will put that in the chat. All right, there's our email address if you have any questions. Questions there to our email. Okay. Okay. I am not good at typing and talking at the same time, so I apologize for the pause there. All right, so let's get started talking a little bit about what affinity groups are. Is there anybody currently with us today that knows what an affinity group is? Feel free to use the raise hand button if you would like to do that. If you know what an affinity group is. If you don't know, that's okay. You can find the raising hand emoji if you go to the bottom of your Zoom window and click on the reactions. There's a smiley face and it says reactions under it. If you click on that, you can choose like to raise your hand or a thumbs up or a heart, something like that. So raise your hand if you know what an affinity group is. All right, I don't see a lot of hands going up, which could be for many reasons. And if you don't, oh, there's a couple. And if you don't know what one is, it's okay. That's why we're here, to learn what they are. All right, so an affinity group space is designed with intentionality in mind. The affinity group is a group made up of individuals with a shared experience or a commonality based on identity or generation, or like I said, an experience. So in this case, while we're coming to today, is we are creating a group training, an affinity group training for one of our trainings that we offer at Scaling Up with Dr. Nacho, who's on here today. And this group is specifically for clinicians who identify as being Black, Indigenous, Asian, or another person of color. There are so many ways that we can be experiencing and walking around as a person of color. So we want to hold a really special space for our therapists of color in our communities. The purpose of an affinity group space is to provide a safe container for folks who share that common experience or common identity to come together and have a place where they're not worried as much about what they might experience from folks who are not part of that group, who are not experiencing the same issues or have the same like general struggles, right, as a therapist of color. And one of our goals in having this affinity group space is that we have all experienced times where, we as clinicians of color here right now with you today, where we have been in large trainings or smaller trainings where there are, the space is mixed. There's a lot of people with different ethnicities, backgrounds, there's, or predominantly white spaces. And there's a lot of harm that can happen either through overt racist comments or examples given during the training, ways that the training is facilitated. There can be microaggressions. There can be a lot of silencing of people of color in the space, minimization of the experiences that people of color might be sharing during the training, and as well as kind of erasure of the experience of being a therapist of color in a predominantly white space. So we wanted to create a training specifically for our therapists of color because we know that the protocols that Dr. Nacho and his team have created are really, really effective for clinicians of color and for clients who are people of color as well, because of the ongoing nature of the adverse experiences that most all people of color experience globally and in the US specifically, because we are currently located in the US. We wanted to, except for Nacho's in Mexico City. But he's here with us often in the US and has his own experiences as well. We wanted to be able to have an environment where our therapists can learn without having to worry with as much, have as much stress and anxiety around how they might be harmed, minimized, tokenized, or, otherwise just, having a really bad experience in a training because there's no one else like them, no one else that can relate in some way. And although calling ourselves therapists of color does not make us a monolith, we are not all the same, we don't have the same experiences, we don't have the same backgrounds, I think we can all relate in some way to what it feels like to be marginalized and oppressed in the mental health field as a whole. And so this training we are excited to have so that we can talk about that stuff as needed, so that we don't have to filter ourselves, we don't have to code switch as much, and we can come to a place of relaxation, groundedness, and connectedness within ourselves and with each other so that we can actually learn. It's really hard to learn a new protocol, especially when EMDR is typically utilized for traumatic experiences, right? So we're already kind of tiptoeing close to stress and anxiety that might be living in our body, or thinking of the experiences of our clients as we're learning this material, and that can be stressful, right? So we want to decrease the likelihood of added racialized stress and trauma in the room. I want to acknowledge that there can still be anti-Blackness in a mixed BIPOC space. There can be anti-Asian sentiment in a mixed BIPOC space. And there can be all kinds of other prejudicial harms that can happen in our space. So while we recognize the need to have a clinician of color space, we also recognize the responsibility that we have in creating this space and recognizing that there still can be harm done. Harm and healing are not on a binary. And so we want to do this as a way to reduce harm. This is a harm reductive strategy that us at Scaling Up are implementing. And we know that we might not get it right the first time. We might make some mistakes, and we are open to taking responsibility for those mistakes and making necessary changes going forward. So another part of our gathering today is to hear from folks here with us live and who are watching the replay or listening to the replay or reading the transcript of the replay, to send us feedback. What would help you feel safe enough, feel secure coming to this training, to feel seen and heard, and be able to learn from Dr. Nacho and the facilitators that we'll have with us? We want to know. So if you don't feel comfortable or you're not quite sure sharing right away today, you can send us an email. We definitely want to know. We have received some feedback from folks who are confused about why we are doing this, who feel as though we are creating a space that excludes folks and that discriminates against other folks. And we understand the confusion. It's not something, affinity group spaces are not something that we are used to in kind of mainstream training spaces. And so today we want to answer any questions that folks might have about that confusion. With that said, we need to make clear that an affinity group space, hosting an affinity group space, is an act of racial justice. It's a way for us to acknowledge that the experiences of therapists of color are vastly different than their white counterparts. And we also need to acknowledge that white supremacy is foundational in the mental health field. And so it is important that we have unique spaces for therapists of color to come, be safe, learn, be seen, and be together and experience something that helps them feel more liberated. And so this is one tiny way that we are doing this at Scaling Up. And we are really excited that we have some folks today, Dr. Nacho, Mercedes, Jackie, and here with us to talk about these things. So thank you so much. I just noticed I've been holding my breath. So I'm going to breathe, and I'm going to pass this on to our next person, who I think is Nacho. I think, Nacho, you're up. You're going to talk about the training in April and share with us a little bit about you and your work and these protocols. So if you're ready to go, I'll just let you, go.
I'm ready to go.
Great.
I'm Dr. Nacho Jarero. I used to say that I live deep down Texas, meaning Mexico City. I am Mexican, clinician of color field work. I have been working in the field after natural or human-provoked disasters since 1998. And I have been in over 200 deployments, working in worst case scenarios. So the protocols you will learn were developed outside the United States, in Latin America, and have been used around the world, literally in all continents, with all cultures, successfully. Our protocols, the protocols that you will learn in our feeling affinity training, that I am very, very, very excited about this, already have 48 published studies. That's the clinical part. Now, as a trainer for our affinity group workshop, I only have one objective for the attendees, for you all, to enjoy the workshop in a safe and relaxed space. That's my objective. It's a workshop full of information, full of practicum. But the best way to learn is to feel relaxed and enjoying the training. Also, the protocols that you will learn on the second day were specifically designed to address the ongoing nature of prolonged adverse experiences. The cumulative trauma exposure memory network of prolonged adverse experiences, maybe a whole year of experiences. We will teach the EMDR clinicians how to conceptualize that cumulative trauma exposure memory network. Jackie loved pictures. I love pictures. I share pictures on each slide of a spider net, a huge spider net. To me, the cumulative trauma exposures memory network, like we are suffering in our life for being different, are like a spider web with hundreds of pathogenic memories. So we will teach you in a friendly space how to first conceptualize, then how to find the Elmer glue, the component that link all the spider web, and how to address with the protocols for individual or group treatment for our communities. I'm already excited. I want to be there. I want to be right now in Philly.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. We love your enthusiasm every time. There's one thing that, Nacho, that you and I were talking, I think Jackie, you were there too. And we were talking about how one of the really neat things about the protocols that you'll be teaching about, that you and your team have refined over the years, is how they were created outside of the office, right? They weren't created in this like clinical, setting with, flip charts and, whatever, like, what's working, right? This clinical setting. It was out in the world on the beach after a disaster. And so it feels very much to you, you were saying, it feels very much like a community created, like out in the community protocol that helps people heal right where they're at. And doesn't make it super complicated about, yes, now, there's research, there's science, like all these things behind it that support it. And really, it's really powerful because it was created for people right where they're at. And it makes a lot of sense for communities of color who do have a continuous experience of trauma and other stressors. It makes sense that something like that would be really beneficial because it's a protocol that meets them right where they're at. And for the clinician as well, right? Like it's designed for the people, like right there in real life. So I loved when we were having that conversation a while ago. Yeah, thank you. All right. Jackie, we would love to hear from you. We would love to hear your experiences with the training. You have been to the training a couple of times. You have used the training with a few different populations. we would love to hear from you what your experience is working with the folks that you do, and like your own experience as a provider as well, what these protocols have done for you as a provider.
Yeah, hello. So this is Jackie. I am a Black woman to describe myself as I'm looking in the camera, right? With a red wall background and some paintings with affirmations. I'm wearing dangling ankh earrings with my hair pulled back, as well as a cartouche around my neck. So me, yeah, so I'm in love. It's not your, she knows. I think for me with anything that we're doing, especially when we're talking about these affinity spaces and even just looking at that piece of it, when we're getting into the body and we're working with our clients and even with ourselves, it's important for our limbic system to be settled, right? We're asking people to come into these spaces and feel. So that means that they're going to be able to feel everything. So that I think that's very, very important about the affinity spaces, because people need to feel safe. That's the first thing. As Nacho said, like when we're in these, grounded spaces, we're able to learn. And it's not even just about that. It's about our experiences. And as communities of color, so often our experiences aren't just experiences. They're also layered and peppered with all of the other racial components and other isms that layer on top of it. And for us not to acknowledge that when we're in these spaces of learning about it and having practices with it, for us not to acknowledge and hold it, that special container that you all have already talked about, just would be counterintuitive, right? We're going to have people come in and it's like, I want you to feel, but don't feel that. But be genuine, but not about that. And oftentimes, I don't know about other folks, that's what I have felt in spaces, and then all the emotional labor that goes along with it. So, and I had my own experiences with that. Many, many times over. And what I will say is even my initial training, so a lot of folks know me as one of the facilitators of EMDR in color, which again is an affinity space specifically for EMDR basic training. And, and I say, with my own experiences with EMDR, it wasn't until I took Nacho's training that I connected. The dots did not connect for me. I didn't feel me. I didn't see me. And there was something very special about the training itself, the way the training was presented, and the profound connection that I had permission and autonomy within this process. It didn't feel so regimented, which is something I think so many of our communities experience. And I got to choose, right? So for those that wind up in the training, you'll get to understand what I mean, but there's so many places that you get to choose, which is something very different. It's also a nod to really looking at how we decolonize mental health spaces, to put people back in space, back in power, especially when power has been taken from them, and to gain that power within your healing process, I think is the most profound thing. And that's what I found with the groups that I work with. So I specialize specifically around racial trauma, and I specialize in the Black community. So really looking at all of the structural racism that the Black community faces, and all the different forms of oppression, very specifically incarceration, and both of our adults and of children, and the legal carceral system and what that all looks like. It's really kind of my wheelhouse in talking about all the instances of, these emotional attacks, right? Because there's nothing micro about it. These are emotional assaults that people have experienced over long periods of time that then feeds into their not being able to access so many things, including education, finances, employment, and all of those things that then compound with the anxiety and the depression. And I'm sure you all, understand where I'm going with it. And these protocols are the difference. They are absolutely the difference, because I am able to sit with my clients and they are a very active participant. And I don't need to ask a lot of questions. People actually just get to feel. And the beauty of some of the work that I do is I'm a community therapist. So a lot of work in the communities, in groups, specifically in groups. I do groups specifically with incarcerated persons behind the walls. And I'm able to see multiple people instead of just one, in spaces that even having time to see one person is precious, but I may be able to see 20 or 30. So that changes things. The ease of being able to do it in community settings, with folks right after tragedies. Here in Philadelphia, we've had issues around gun violence, community violence, and how I'm able to just go into, whether it's a school setting, a community setting, and so many others. And there's immediate, profound change. And I could go on and on and on about it. But I think at this point that kind of wraps up my own passion with it. I would also say that for those who have other modalities, it's something that's so beautifully integrated, because the way that Nacho has crafted it, it's organic. This is organic healing process. This isn't bringing something in and teaching someone something new. We're actually incorporating each individual's organic way that their body tries to reset to heal. And I think that's what's so beautiful about the protocols themselves.
Thank you for sharing, Jackie. This is Robin. Thank you for sharing again. Beautiful. Love it. I love how you talk about your work in the community and making space for each individual person's organic path toward healing and autonomy and power and a decolonial way of being in a healing space with somebody else. I love that. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us. All right, Mercedes, you're up. Mercedes, we also want to hear from you and your work, your experience in the training, your experience with the protocols as a provider, and with the folks that you work with on a regular basis.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Robin, and everyone for attending and for being here, and thank you for scaling up. For having me. This is so awesome. I felt so aligned when I found Scaling Up, and then I've known Robin forever. And so I'm like, oh my God, this is all aligned. So I just have to say that out loud. But I am Mercedes Smudia. I am an African-American woman. I have pink earphones on because I like having earphones. It kind of cancels out the noise in the room for me. I have a blurred background, so you can't really see everything, but there's a black printer behind me, and you might be able to see my little unicorn shape back here, and I'm wearing a maroon tank top. For me, as I said, when I got started with my intro, when I found Scaling Up, I took everything they have on their website. I took everything, anything that was there. I was like, I'm taking it, because Assist, Prezi, IGTP, all of them felt very much in alignment with how I believed we should be looking at trauma. And I say this as someone who had EMDR training before I got to Scaling Up, meaning I understood trauma. Trauma was part of my own healing. I've done EMDR myself as a client. I really did feel connected to EMDR. When people often ask me, I'm also BSP, brain spotting trained too. So like I'm neck deep in this trauma work. And so when the people ask me to explain it, I often say, kind of piggybacking off of what Jackie said, I have all of these because you never know, as people begin to bring up their memories and bring up their past, what procedure they're going to need best in that moment. And what I've loved about Nacho's work and brain spotting is that they're both really intuitive. I feel like Nacho actually, and I forget who said that, was it Jackie or Robin, but when you guys said that taking this actually connected EMDR for me, I was like, yes, yes, yes. It really pared down the density of EMDR, which if any of you are EMDR trained at all, you know it's super dense stuff. And this training helped me to say, okay. I was sitting there the whole time I was doing it. I did, I think, one online first, and I think I did it, the second one virtually with Nacho presenting. And Nacho is so dynamic as he presents, and the way that he shares anecdotes as he's discussing about the protocol actually feels very in alignment with my learning style, where it's like, I like to hear what's happening as you're talking about what's happening, because it helps me say, okay, that's what it looks like when you're working with somebody. And so it all just kind of clicked for me. And what really kind of took this over the edge for me is that my niche is parents. If you know anything about me, I am a parenting person. I created Chain Proof Parenting. I'm working on the parental identity development model. And what I've learned over and over again with the parents that I work with is that every parent comes into their parenting with their childhood trauma, good, bad, or indifferent. No matter how much they've worked through it, no matter how much they've ignored it, they start parenting with it. And as I work with my parents using some of the protocols, helping them go back, running those mental movies has been just, again, if you do EMDR or anything like that, you understand, but having people talk about, right, and then, and even having them link, I see why I can't handle my child's emotion. My mom was so rude to mine. And again, you'd think, of course, someone would see that. But when you lose those memories, you can't remember that your mom treated you like that. And as you're doing it to your child, you don't remember that lesson that maybe you got taught, or you do, and it's super maladaptive. And so talking through this with my parents has been really helpful. Sometimes I'll even explain the procedure, because some of my parents are very like, what are you doing to me? What is this? It can be a little hypnotic sometimes. I'll explain kind of what happens in the brain, because Dr. Nacho explained it. The way you explained it, I kind of began to put my own ideas together and say, oh, this is how I can explain it to people when they say, how did you do that? And how did you get that memory? I didn't know I had that, and like, right, how did we do that? And so I share all this to say that I think, as Jackie said, this is such a great compliment if you're already doing trauma work, if you've already gotten familiar with EMDR and AIP models and neural pathways, if you're a somatic person, like all of these things I've noticed, they all really link back to what we've started to learn about trauma, which is it's stored and it's stored and it's stored. Whether you know it's there or not, it's stored, right? And so I love this model because it's helped enhance my own work with trauma. It's helped me to understand my own work myself as I'm going through my therapy. And I think it's really given me another layer to support the parents that I do the work with, because as I've looked at that generational, intergenerational trauma, I love being able to help parents understand finding these memories not only frees you, but it gives you so much more expansiveness to be there for your kid, because your kid's not pushing up against your stuff. They've got a whole person they can push up against. And that's really what I talk about when I share these procedures or talk about any type of trauma work. And it's been a lot because of these procedures. So thank you, Nacho, and thank you, Scaling Up. It's been really supportive in how I've been bringing this work to families.
Thank you so much, Mercedes, for sharing your experience. I love the way that you talk about how it helps to make connections for you and with your clients as well, about all the different things that contribute to why we feel the way we do, why we're showing up in our parenting or other relationships, why is it? And it demystifies it a little bit. So I love that. And I'm noticing a common theme with everyone talking today so far is that, none of our experiences are in our isolation. And so it's part of also why it's important that we as therapists who are working with communities of color, or we are therapists of color as well, we recognize that the intersections of all of our experiences, the intersections of various systems of power and oppression that play into and that contribute to our daily lives and the stressors and the ways that we need to heal and the blockages to those as well. So whether it be intergenerational trauma, parenting stress just all by itself, right? Like just, I'm a parent, so I know that stress, it never comes up all by itself, right? My own parenting stress, the stress that the stress that my friends talk about with regards to parenting, all talk about how, gosh, like, I wonder if people, who aren't queer feel this way. I wonder if people who are, white have this experience or fear when they're parenting, right? So there's always these layers. It's multi-layered, and we know that EMDR is one way that we can unlock those layers bit by bit. All right, thank you again, Mercedes. All right, we have Ernesto. Ernesto, we would love to hear from you, Ernesto. I know you're here with us. Thank you for joining us. I know you had some tech issues, but you are here now. Please share with us your experiences of the power of connection and community in BIPOC or therapist of color spaces. Feel free to let us know. There you are. Okay, I can see you now. When you unmute yourself and get ready to talk, please give folks a quick description of yourself. Not everyone who will be listening will be able to see you, so them knowing a little bit about your setting and a little bit about you would be great. So
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can other folks?
Yeah.
I see some.
Thank you so much for having me, Robin. I was just making a comment, and I texted you right now. I just said, you're such a great host, and thank you for doing this. Hi, everybody. My name is Ernesto Segismundo, and I am a Filipino Hawaiian, and I am here in California. And in my background, I've got, what is this? It's a shiplap and a TV. I just did a podcast earlier today. And so this is actually my podcast setting. I've got a microphone, a really big one in front of me, and headsets, black headsets. And I'm also wearing a Kauai t-shirt. I'm sporting off my home here. And I'm so glad to see my people here and my friends. Thank you so much for all you do. So one of the things that I have been really mindful of working with and being I also connect people through my summits and my conferences. Mercedes were one of my speakers, and Robin, you'll be one of my speakers in the future in Tennessee. And so one of the things that I've learned in providing a space for people of color is that I'm learning about myself. I'm learning a lot about myself as a retired psychotherapist, and I have a group practice here, and the people that I have on staff are very mindful of the ancestral work that we have done and how much that plays into our daily lives. And so one of the things that I have been so impressed about, and Dr. Nacho, thank you so much for being here, because I was so impressed with your work, with the little amount of time that I had spent with you, but I had no idea how much I didn't know. And so for me, as one who provides space for my clinicians to work from a certain type of lens, I also am very mindful of clinicians working with me and besides me to understand the ancestral and cultural pieces. Now, I don't know all the answers yet. I am still trying to understand and figure things out, but all I know is that the voice that we give our soul that has been oppressed, that has been marginalized, and even our ancestors who have experienced this, knowing what my ancestors have been through working in the cane fields in Hawaii, and their mindset and where they're at now really helps me to understand myself and the way that I work with folks here in the area of employing them and all of those things. So my lens, as far as how I want to help the community, are twofold. One is for the community, those who are non-therapists, to understand that culture and their background and their stories matter in the context of working with their soul. And I'm also now giving a voice to the ancestors that they came from and being curious about it and asking questions if they understand how their ancestors in the past play within the context of their framework. The other is for mental health professionals who, whether they work for me or they work alongside me or they're speakers, to understand that everything that we communicate, I want to respect and bring that in, right? Your culture, your backgrounds, to bring that in. And so that is my framework now. I don't do direct contact with clients anymore, but I provide that space for incredible presenters like you, Robin, and Mercedes, to really communicate what I can't or what I'm still struggling to understand, as far as where I come from and how my Filipino background and my own experiences growing up in Hawaii, how that plays a role, not only in my soul and my spirit, but also how I work with others. One of the things that I've been very mindful of as a leader and a group practice owner of 20 clinicians is being mindful about how my culture and my structure is not oppressive, from the area of how I pay them, how I treat them, making sure that they understand that as a boss, as a leader, I am harnessing their gifts and not dwindling or minimizing their cultural backgrounds and beliefs. So it has worked well in our culture. We have cultural Friday days where people bring in their food. Like the office space on Fridays usually smells like Filipino, which is Filipino food. We have lumpia, we have all of that. The following week, we have Chinese food, Indonesian food. So we try to celebrate as much as possible that we can. So Robin, thank you so much for this space, and seeing my friends here, I think is so refreshing, and it's really empowering actually. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I love that. Now I'm hungry. I'll be there on Friday. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think Ernesto, your story and your experience highlights what we want to start to cultivate with our affinity groups training, is that we get to show up and honor our cultural traditions, our lineage, our ancestral wisdom and experiences. And we don't have to worry as much about, oh gosh, what are people going to think, because when there's a whole crew of people of color in a space where we're all trying to figure it out, right? We're all trying to figure out, who am I in the context of this work, in the context of my own racialized trauma healing. It's so beautiful to be able to be in a space where we get to show up fully, or as fully as we possibly can, right? So when we're not going to all be best friends when we show up to Philadelphia in April, but I do
Maybe
believe
we can be.
maybe we can be. I mean, hey,
wait a minute. Let's go back. We're gonna talk about my city, the city of brotherly love. We are gonna all be friends when you leave here.
Yeah, well, when we leave, yes, we know that when we leave, there will be really profound connection with everyone that joins us in that space. And so thank you, Ernesto, for painting a picture for us of what it can feel like to have that honored. And we are really glad that I am really grateful to be able to hear the experiences of everyone today. And I wish we had the time to learn about the experiences of all of you who are attending live and watching the replay. I really do, because I love storytelling. I love connecting through experiences. But unfortunately, we can't do that today. So I want to take the last couple of minutes to answer a couple of questions and share some logistics. So we did get a question in the chat, and the question was, does scaling up have some sort of policy or statement about particularly white therapists going into countries that have been impacted by US foreign policy, and in parentheses, colonization, interfering in wars for political and economic gain, etc.? I attended a training in Austin and plan to go to one in Chicago. Awesome. Can't wait to have you there. Does Scaling Up have a statement about that? No. And it is something that we've talked about as a team, Kelly, specifically Kelly, Meredith, and I know that Kelly and Nacho have had conversations in the past too about that. What we do talk about is when anyone is going into a place that's not their home, it's important to be invited, and it's important to center the experiences of the folks who live there, the folks whose culture you are being invited into, and to not colonize the experience. And so that is something that we do talk a lot about. What does that mean? How do we do that? How do we do humanitarian work globally? Recognizing, especially if we're coming from the US, recognizing what that means, the power that we have as people coming from the US going into other places that have historically and continue to experience the harms of imperialism and other things. So no, there's no statement in policy on a website or anything like that, but it is something that we do have intentional conversation about with one another. And if anyone is going somewhere else, they have intentional conversation with their team and the folks that they're going to join. So I don't know, Nacho, if you have other information that you want to add to that, since you've done that several times, you've gone with Kelly to places and other folks. So if there is something that you have to add to that, feel free. I will. Yeah.
Yes, and this is Dr. Nacho Jarero, and I would like to talk more about in depth about the Ministry of Presence. That's the approach I have been working on for the last 25 years, working in the field around the world. Ministry of Presence. The meaning is that when I arrive to a place, to a country, I don't know, I'm always invited. Mexico is not in war with any country. And I spend days listening, being inside the groups, the culture, having breakfast, having lunch, having dinner, listening. The culture, their problems. I already know that they are traumatized because of the disaster. I already know that. I already know what to do, but when I deploy, usually is for at least 15 days. And the first 5 at least is my own Ministry of Presence. Mingle, it is correct the word in English. Mingle with the community, it is correct. Just being present, listening to their necessities, to their cultural traditions. At what time do they have lunch? At what time do they rest? At what time do they pray? At least 5 days before even attempt to provide mental health services.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I hope that question was answered. If not, please send us an email to info@scalingupemdr.com and we will talk with you more about that via email or plan a time to chat on the phone or something. I just want to take another minute or two and see if anyone has any questions. I posted the links to the training in the chat. The first link I shared was the main information page about the training, like what is it, what's involved, what are the CEs, what's the cost, all of that. And the second link is the link to the registration page So if you already know you want to come, you can just click on that and sign up. This is a hybrid event, meaning we have an in-person component and a virtual live stream component. So if you sign up for the live stream because you don't feel comfortable traveling due to the pandemic or other issues, you can sign up for our live stream. The live stream is, you'll be witnessing the same exact things as our folks in the physical space will. We'll have cameras in the space that are recording the training live. You can ask questions live, all of that. So we have that set up. If you sign up for in-person and you have any reason that you need to switch to the live stream option, you can do that. We understand that the ever-changing nature of the pandemic leads to a lot of anxiety about signing up for in-person events. We honor that, we understand. And while we will do everything in our power to create a safe in-person environment, we recognize that gathering at all increases the risk of exposure to COVID. So feel free to sign up for either one, and you can switch from in-person to virtual at any time. Just let us know so that we know where you are, where you plan on attending. And again, if you have any questions about an affinity group space, why we're doing it, all of that, feel free to send us an email. We want this to be great for you if you plan on attending. Right now, this is the only Therapist of Color affinity group training we have for 2022. We might have one in the future, but this is what we have right now. We only have the one in Philly in April, April 22nd and 23rd. Location to be determined, hopefully by the end of the week. Y'all, it's hard to find a space in April during a pandemic. It's the kickoff of wedding season too. So all these venues are filled up with weddings. And also we're trying to find one that's really awesome and aligns with our goals too. So thank you very much for being here. I didn't see any new questions showing up, just a lot of appreciation. Thank you everyone for being here, for being willing and open to learning about what an affinity group space is. And if it's right for you, or right for your colleagues, maybe you want to share this. We'll send out the link to the replay. Please share it with your colleagues who might be curious as well about an affinity group space and what it can mean for them to attend. All right, I think that's it, right? Thank you, everyone. I had a great time. Ooh, someone asked real quick, can you clarify the $40 a month extended access? Okay, so an extended access is for our on-demand trainings. If you sign up for an on-demand training, which is a pre-recorded training that you can take at your own pace, you have access to it for 90 days. If after that 90 days you still need time with that, you can choose to pay for extended access at $40 a month. So that's what that means. All right, I think that's it. We will see you all later in email or in person in Philadelphia in April. Thank you so much. Yes, Nacho's doing the butterfly hugs. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah.